Today, we're diving deep into a fascinating archaeological mystery that has captivated minds for centuries: the elusive evidence of Pharaoh, Moses, and the Exodus. Many have questioned the historical accuracy of these ancient tales, and today we're going to explore the lack of archaeological evidence and propose an intriguing hypothesis that could shed new light on this enigmatic chapter of history. Let's start with the elephant in the room: the lack of archaeological evidence supporting the existing of Pharaoh, Moses, and the Exodus. Despite the rich history of ancient Egypt and the meticulous record keeping of the time, we find ourselves with more questions than answers. So, where are the artifacts, inscriptions, or any tangible proof of these iconic figures and events? To truly understand the mystery, we need to delve into the historical context. Scholars have combed through ancient Egyptian records, looking for any mention of Moses or the Exodus, but the silence is deafening. It has led many to question whether these events occurred as described or if there is something missing from the historical narrative. Now, here is where things get interesting. Phao Ra was a king who ruled a part of ancient Egypt towards the end of the 14th Dynasty during the Second Intermediate Period, which lasted towards the end of the 18th century BC until the middle of the 17th century BC. The 14th Dynasty ruled over the Nile Delta region in northern Egypt, and most scholars believe that the origins of the kings of the 14th Dynasty were not Egyptians and were mainly West Asians, including the Canaanites. The name Phao Ra is pretty close to Pharaoh, and even the ancient Egyptian pronunciation is pretty close to the Hebrew pronunciation of the name Pharaoh. Now, this is how King Phao Ra's name appears in the hieroglyphs. You will see some additional letters and some additional prefixes, which is pretty typical in the hieroglyphs. For example, this basket right here reads as Neb. Neb means Lord or God, which could be another piece of evidence that actually this guy, King Phao Ra, did claim to be the Lord or the God. Is King Phao Ra, the pharaoh, mentioned in the biblical stories? Surprisingly, shortly after King Phao Ra's reign, another interesting king's name appears in the 16th dynasty. It's King Musa or Messu, who's known as Dedumose I. You likely correctly guessed the next question. Was King Dedumose I the biblical leader and prophet Moses? Well, that's my hypothesis, which I'm presenting in the book Phao Ra and King Musa. Based on the archaeological evidence and the historical events mentioned in the book, King Phao Ra from the 14th dynasty is likely to be the biblical pharaoh, and King Musa from the 16th dynasty, who's known as Dedumose I, is likely to be the biblical Moses. Yet, the archaeological evidence and the historical events tell us that there are deviations from the biblical story. Dedumose I, or Musa, or Messu, was a king of the Second Intermediate Period. He most likely was one of the kings of the 16th dynasty, who reigned between about 1588 to about 1582 BC. Dedu is a prefix, which means that his name is actually Musa or Messu. Dedumose I is mentioned on the stele found in July 1902 in southern part of the Tell of Edfu. King Dedumose I, or Musa or Messu, reigned for a short time, about 7 years only, over a part of Egypt with no recorded significant military power. It seems that he was more of a cult or a group leader. And that is how his name is written in hieroglyphs. So we have Dedu as a prefix, and we have Messu or Musa as his name. It's worth mentioning that the word Musa or Messu in the ancient Egyptian language translates to birth. More precisely, refers to the birth of someone who's a reflection of the characteristics of her or his parents or ancestors or creators. So like a gift for his parents or ancestor or creator by becoming a reflection of their characteristics. Let me tell you the summary of the hypothesis. King Phao Ra was a West Asian who controlled a part of northern Egypt in the Delta region toward the end of the 14th Dynasty. The 14th Dynasty started from the end of the 18th century BC to the middle of the 17th century BC. King Phao Ra is likely to be the biblical pharaoh. King Phao Ra was from the same political alliance of the West Asians who immigrated to ancient Egypt in huge groups. This political alliance included the Canaanites. The Israelites were likely one group or tribe of those Canaanites. Political tension arose between King Phao Ra and his old political allies, mainly the Israelites, and he started a campaign of oppression against them. A man named Musa started a new movement preaching ideological teachings, challenging King Phao Ra. Several groups, but not limited to the Israelites, followed him. The Israelites found a great opportunity in him to gain some political strength against King Phao Ra. The Israelites, together with the other groups following Musa or Messu, did achieve victories against King Phao Ra under Moses' leadership, who then managed a part of ancient Egypt and reigned for a short time, about 7 years, from about 1588 to 1582 BC. During that time, about 1550 BC, another West Asian alliance called the Hyksos controlled wider parts of ancient Egypt. Dedumose I tried to sue them for peace and might have succeeded in living in peace simultaneously with them for some time. A few years later came the native ancient Egyptian king Dedu-Mose I, who was the founder of the 18th Dynasty that was about 1550 to 1292 BC. King Dedu-Mose completed the conquest and expulsion of the Hyksos from the Nile Delta. It became a priority for the 18th, 19th, and later dynasties to face the threat of the West Asians and prevent them from controlling any parts of ancient Egypt again. Then came King Ramses II, who reigned from about 1303 to about 1213 BC, and whose name is Ra Musa II and not Ramses II. He decided to expel any foreign threats from Egypt. His campaign wasn't specifically on the Israelites, it was against any foreign threat on Egyptian soil in general. Until King Ra Musa II, we don't have any archaeological evidence that the Israelites were called or known by that name. The first and only archaeological evidence from ancient Egypt that potentially refers to the Israelite under that name comes from the reign of the successor of King Ra Musa II. It's the Merenptah stele. King Merenptah was the successor of Ra Musa II in the 19th dynasty. He reigned from about 1213 to about 1203 BC. He followed the West Asian groups, including potentially the Israelites, to the land of Canaan to remove the seeds of the threat. The Merenptah stele is the only archaeological inscription from ancient Egypt that some scholars claim that it mentions Israel. The text is mainly an account of Merenptah's victory over the ancient Libyans and their allies, but the last 3 of the 28 lines deal with a separate campaign in Canaan. It includes a sentence that some scholars consider that it is referring to Israel. And the exact translation of this sentence is Yezra'yar is laid waste, its seed is no more. The last 3 lines in the Merenptah stele mention a military campaign in Canaan and refer to several groups in the Canaanite land and not only Yezra'yar, which is evidence confirming the nature of political landscape in Canaan as city-states or tribe-states formed by tribes or groups with no central or federal authority. We have another archaeological evidence, which is the triumphal relief of King Sheshonq I, who reigned from about 943 to 922 BC. And this triumphal relief refers to the names of groups and locations in the land of Canaan that were conquered by King Sheshonq I. This list doesn't mention the Israelites or Yezra'yar, which has few significant indications. The land of Canaan still had the same political landscape characterized by city-states or tribe-states with no central or federal authority. there was no group called the Israelites or Bani Israel or Yisrael on the Canaan land during that time, the time of Shesheng I, from about 943 to about 922 BC. Despite that some of the names mentioned in the triumphal relief of Shesheng I have similarities with some names of some of the locations and tribes mentioned in the Bible, that doesn't confirm that these groups are the Israelites. They are Canaanite tribes and city-states. The Israelites or Yisrael tribe state probably lasted for a short time during King Merenptah's reign from about 1213 to about 1203 BC, and then it was conquered and disappeared from any archaeological evidence. The triumphal relief of Shesheng I doesn't mention any Solomon's temple or David's city, despite that it does mention many other locations on that relatively small piece of land. So let's have a quick comparison between some of the historical and archaeological evidence and the biblical story. So the biblical story tells us there was an ancient Egyptian king named or entitled Pharaoh or Pharaoh. The anticipated historical events based on the historical and archaeological evidence tell us that there was a West Asian king who controlled parts of northern ancient Egypt toward the end of the 14th Dynasty, and his name was Phao Ra. So he wasn't an ancient Egyptian. There is no consensus on the chronology of the biblical events. Some scholars suggested from 1391 to 1271 BC. Others considered that Moses' birth year was either 1592 BC or 1571 BC. According to the historical events mentioned in that book, the story of King Phao Ra and Dedumose I or Messu or Musa happened during the 14th to the 16th dynasties, and that was from about 1650 to about 1582 BC. The biblical story of the Exodus refers to the Israelites' enslavement and the 10 plagues. The historical events and archaeological evidence tell us that King Phao Ra likely started a campaign of oppression against his old political allies and new opponents, the Israelites. Additionally, there were likely famines and plagues towards the end of the 13th and 14th dynasties in ancient Egypt. The biblical story of the Exodus refers to the departure of the Israelites from ancient Egypt during the Pharaoh's reign. According to the archaeological and historical evidence, there was no departure during King Phao Ra's reign. It's likely that Dedumose I, or Messu or Musa, and his followers achieved some victories over Phao Ra and lived in some parts of Egypt simultaneously with the Hyksos. Some suggest that King Ramses II or Ra Musa II was the pharaoh of the Exodus. His name was Ra Musa II. The historical and archaeological evidence doesn't support the hypothesis that he was the pharaoh of the Exodus. King Ra Musa II might have expelled some West Asian groups that were considered a threat to national security, but this is not to be confused with the events that happened about 350 years earlier during the reign of King Phao Ra. In conclusion, the mystery of Pharaoh, Moses, and the Exodus persists, but our exploration today and what is mentioned in the book Pharaoh and King Musa open the door for new possibilities. By re-examining historical records and exploring uncharted archaeological evidence, we may uncover hidden truth that reshape our understanding of this ancient tale. What are your thoughts on this hypothesis? Share your insights in the comments below. Thanks for joining me on this archaeological journey. If you enjoyed this video, check out my other deep dives into history and mysteries. See you in the next one.